Recently, I visited Dr. Neil's garden in the east of Edinburgh, which is sometimes called Edinburgh's secret garden and has been a source of inspiration and contemplation even before the garden was created. That's Duddingston Loch, and it sits right next to the loch, and I am heading that way right towards it. It sits between Duddingston Kirk, which you can just see over there, and then slopes down to the loch, and it's got Arthur's Seat in the background, which is a really lovely vista once you're in the garden and look up. I think one of the reasons why it must be called Edinburgh's Secret Garden is because I couldn't even find it. This is my first time visiting, and I actually ended up going completely the wrong way. I thought, because there's an entrance to what looks like a different garden on the other side of the kirk, and I went there first, and I'd actually gone to look around this garden with friends, and so I called one of my friends, just checking I was in the right place. Turns out I was obviously in a completely wrong place. There's no signage at the front where those large gates are, so I just thought the other one was more of an obvious sort of entryway, but that just leads down to the loch. It's a good spot for feeding the ducks, but there's no garden proper, there's a wild garden there, but no cultivated garden. So headed back that way to the large gates and found it. So you have to kind of walk through the garden area that belongs, I think, to the kirk before you actually come into the gate for the garden. And as you can see, this is the garden, and it has a little donation point for £3, which I did on the way out, because the garden is free to visit and it's open 7 days a week, which is brilliant. And so I just want to support the cause. So as you can see, there's the loch just peeping out over there. There's a lot of conifer planting. There's also a lot of alpines, heathers, rhododendrons, azaleas, and some herbaceous borders. This is a beautiful acer tree. I just love the shape of the leaves, and I always just love looking up at trees against the sky. So pretty. Some geraniums there, and then across the path there is a red leaf rose, which the bees were absolutely loving. And I just love the colour of the petals, the way they go from white to pink. The Latin name is Rosa glauca, just in case you wanted to know. And this amazing thing just happened. I thought it was a dragonfly. It's actually a blue-tailed damselfly landed on my shoulder, which was just so incredible. I love when really amazing things like that happen, when nature chooses to, fly to you or land on you, something like that. I think it's just always just amazes me, and I feel so privileged. So after the damselfly flew away and I looked at the bees enjoying the rose, I carried on down the path and also started to spot all the little nooks where people could sit. There were loads of benches dotted all around the garden, which does give that contemplative feeling, that you can just sit and kind of look. They're all kind of facing the loch, and you can just look and just completely chill out in your surroundings, and it's beautiful. This is the wall of the 12th century kirk, and as you can see, it's pretty high, and it gives that enveloped, cosy feeling to the garden. The garden isn't really that big, but so it does feel cozy, and yet there are because there's loads of different paths that you can take, it does almost make it feel big. So it's kind of got this dual feel to it of kind of cozy nooks and crannies, but also lots of places to explore. And this is one of them. This is a beautiful shady garden, lots of hostas and brunnera, and this beautiful lily, which I had to look up because I hadn't really seen anything like this that I can remember. It's called a martagon lily, and it does like shade, so it was perfect in this area, and it was a bit of a showstopper. So I headed through the shady area, and down this little path on the end at the right is a catinus shrub. It is known as a smoke bush, and it is so beautiful. If we ever get a bigger garden, I would love to have one of these in it. Just the colours, the new leaf colour that comes out, that kind of almost translucent red, is just so pretty. And further down here, you can see this is quite a wild area. They've let the grass grow tall in certain sections, which is amazing for wildlife. Over there, you can see Arthur's Seat in the distance, which looks very grand and dramatic. Suddenly feel like you're in the Highlands for a second. And just behind that tree is a lovely little pond area. Down here, we've got more geraniums. And over in this spot, there's a little carved seat, just a singular little seat, which looks super cute. So I headed towards the pond area, and you can see in the background there's some astilbes over there. They are great beside ponds, and the bees absolutely love them, as you'll see in a minute. I go around and have a look because I can just hear the buzzing of the bees. But this section right there is just so stunning. Just all the planting, the trees, Arthur's Seat in the background, and the pond section below. It's just so lush and just screams summertime. I just love it. Behind that stone wall is a bench with a beautiful outlook over the loch, and there's a little kind of tiered succulent section just there as well. So this is the pond area with the astilbes at the back there, and just look how many bees are on it. It's crazy. You can get astilbes in lots of different colours, kind of reds, all different shades of pink, and clearly the bees are just absolutely loving them. So if you have an area that's kind of partially shady and has moisture retentive soil, then it would be a good plant to choose in terms of, well, looking beautiful, but also, to benefit the bees. Over to the side of the pond is a rowan tree, and you can just see the berries are forming, and they're going to turn the most gorgeous bright red. The caterpillars of the apple fruit moth feed on the berries, and they are a super rich autumn food source for many, many birds. So like the cotinus, if I can ever have the space to grow a rowan tree, I would love to do that as well. And this is one of the many benches in the garden. Next to the bench is a shrub called the Olearia paniculata. It's indigenous to New Zealand, and it loves coastal areas, which, as Edinburgh's right next to the sea, is perfect. There's some more roses and a hawthorn. And then this view, as I turn around, is just so lovely. We're now approaching one of my absolute favourite parts of the garden. It's the lochside area. So you pass loads more really like bright pink geraniums, and then you pop down these steps, and it's just like you're entering a completely different world. On the right, I spot another damselfly, but it will not go in focus, so you can't really see it properly, but it is there, I promise. I really, really tried, but no, it's not happening. There's another wild rose here, this time a white rugosa, and then it's time for swan spotting through the reeds. The reeds were taller than I was, which I loved because it made me feel really mini and like I was an explorer. So I had to push quite a few of them out of the way just to get through. The path was really, really narrow, but they had these little sections where you could see through, and you could see all the bird life on the loch, including the swans. There was quite a few more in the distance. Lots and lots of lily pads and little marshy areas, and you can see why the damselflies love it. It's just an absolutely perfect habitat for them. Then we approach this clearing, which has a mini rocky outcrop, which makes it feel really connected to Arthur's Seat, which is basically a massive rocky outcrop. So I liked that link between the two. And then there's a much wider opening to see the loch fully in all its glory. And now we're approaching a gunnerer plant, which love being next to waterside. And look at the flower, isn't it absolutely incredible? It just feels so prehistoric. It's crazy. And also, I just love the sound of the reeds. So I'm going to stop talking so you can listen to the rustling. It's just such a beautiful sound. This plant with the really cool yellow flowers is what I think is a Jerusalem sage, a Phlomis fructicosa, and you can see there's another damselfly just resting on the stem, and this time it's a little bit more in focus, which is very, very nice. I actually did a drawing of this on my Instagram, over at Wren in the Wild on Instagram, if you want to have a little look at that. And this is the end of the reed walk. You come back out into the main garden section, and you can see there's another little bench there, a nice little stone one straight ahead. Lots of firs and pines, and then over here, along the end of this path, you'll see a tiny little yellow building. This is called Thompson's Tower, and it was built for the Duddingston Curling Society to store its stones. And so Duddingston, I probably didn't explain earlier, but Duddingston is a little village just above the garden. Obviously, you saw Duddingston Kirk earlier, and then the village is just follows on from that. This is one of many intersections of paths in the garden, and it's just like ibble obble chocolate bubble, which one shall I choose? Chose to go along the right hand side one, and I'm so glad I did, because the hedge on my right, soon there's an opening, and you go into what's another one of my favourite parts of the garden. It's called the Psychic Garden, and it was built to commemorate Dr. Nancy Neal and Dr. Andrew Neal, who were the doctors who completely created the garden. They started work on the garden in 1963, and as the sign says in the arbour, they had a strong belief in the therapeutic value of gardening and encouraged their patients to work with them there. Both the doctors died in 2005, and this garden was built to commemorate them, and it was built in a flower shape. Half the flower is dedicated to Nancy, who had a special interest in gyno-urinary medicine, and half of the flower is dedicated to Dr. Andrew Neal, who was interested in the treatment of ear, nose and throats, and they're all filled with medicinal plants that relate to those specialisms. So, for example, in the gyno-urinary specialism section, there is Apothecary's Rose, which is Rosa gallica officinalis. And in the ear, nose and throat specialism section, there is Rosemary and Evening Primrose as well. So this is me heading out of the garden now, and I did just want to mention in Thompson's Tower they actually have regular exhibitions on, and they had one when I was there, and it was really pretty, like naturescapes, lots of flowers, lots of fields, and you're just free to walk around and look, and you could buy the paintings if you wanted, so that was a really nice extra addition to everything else that you see in the garden. They've got an exhibition space as well. And here's another one of those moments where it's intersecting paths, and I was just going to follow the path that I was on, but I decided to quickly just nip to the left and just see what was around that little corner, because I hadn't seen that section before. And I'm glad I did, because there were some beautiful little vistas of the loch and Arthur's Seat and lots of other little nooks and crannies. Here's a beautiful big hosta on the corner here, and up this path there is a lovely acer on the right hand side. Look at that deep burgundy colour, and some campanula just poking up through it there. Lovely conifers, again another moment where you just feel like you could be in the Highlands. Another gorgeous bench to look out on that beautiful view. I like this section because it was little pockets of planting in amongst the grass and little pockets of seating areas. And I also really liked this cute birdhouse. It looked very Harry Potter-esque. And here I'm walking through some azaleas, and if I was in this garden in March, April time, they would just be filled with the most beautiful bright flowers, which is great because at that time of year you're just yearning for some colour. So I think I might have to come back here at that time to give myself a bit of a lift. Look at this stunning lily, the colour is just insane. There's some cosmos in that closed off section, and then they have plants for sale both there at the entrance and also in the middle of the garden as well, and then it's back out through the sticky gate with the really cool duck doorstop. Then it was time for me to go back home on my bike. Please excuse the wobbly filming, I'm not used to filming on my bike. I hope you've enjoyed the video of Dr. Neil's garden. If you are visiting Edinburgh, or even if you live in Edinburgh and you've never been, I can highly recommend it. It's such a lovely, peaceful area filled with gorgeous plants and insects, and it's definitely worth a wander around.